Hey, it's Samantha Hartley of the Profitable Joyful Consulting Podcast. This season, we're talking about consulting advice. And you may have ever gotten the advice to never negotiate your fees or always be prepared to negotiate. So should we or shouldn't we? And really, what is negotiation? And is it the same thing as haggling or not? Well, I have a guest today who's going to speak with us about this because I feel like negotiation is, first of all, such a scary subject for a lot of people, especially women. And we are disempowered when we're afraid to go to that place and do certain things. It can't be that scary for us. So I wanted you to have some fresh concepts about it and really good skills. I think there's a lot of negative associations with negotiation, you should have this scorched earth policy, or it's not a good negotiation unless everybody leaves the table unhappy. And I'm like, what if there was a different way to do those things? You've heard me talk a lot about the concept of doing things that are in the highest good of all concerned. And can we do negotiation that way? Well, my guest today has some amazing ideas about it. And not only that, she says this really fascinating thing, which is that your negotiation style probably hasn't changed since you were a 4-year-old. So if that's intriguing, then you're going to really want to hear this episode. Christine McKay is a business negotiation strategist, international speaker, host of the In the Ven Zone podcast, and author of Why Not Ask? A Conversation About Getting More. Christine holds a Harvard MBA and is the CEO founder of Ven Negotiation. She has negotiated with nearly half of the Fortune 500 and hundreds of small and mid-sized companies across 53 countries. Please join me in welcoming Christine. So Christine, how I love to start is if you would tell a story that illustrates your work, kind of a before and after scenario of someone that you've worked with and how you got a good result for them.
So one of my favorite stories is this was from a number of years ago. It was during the dot-com era. The bubble was bursting and I had just gotten laid off work and had decided to call a bunch of CEOs I knew and see if they needed help negotiating bad deals that they had gotten themselves into. And one of them hired me, and it was an internet services company. They owed over $1 million to their hosting provider, which was where their data center was. And the company, the supplier, was threatening to throw them out of the data center, which would essentially have shut the business down entirely. I was able to successfully negotiate a 73% reduction in their liability, keep them in the data center, and continue that relationship. That company ended up existing for 7 more years and sold for over $150 million to a Fortune 100 tech company. And so I just recently reconnected with the CEO, and he said that I not only helped them survive, but I helped them thrive. And that's one of my favorite stories. I loved that. I loved doing that work and helping companies stay in existence when they think that they're going to have to fold.
Well, it's amazing. It's amazing that you can negotiate that. I mean, I've been in a lot of situations negotiating money. Sometimes somebody is supposed to be paying me, and sometimes I was supposed to pay somebody, IRS. And it's amazing that you can negotiate all the universe of things that can be negotiated. I mean, is everything really negotiable?
So I say everything is negotiable except for mountains, rivers, waterfalls, and oceans, and your values. Don't negotiate your values. But generally, yeah. I mean, my view is if I can conceive it, I can contract it. So that's one of the things I love about negotiation is effective negotiation is about being curious. I mean, you use that word right before you hit record. You're like, I'm just going to be curious. And that's what effective negotiation is about, is being curious about yourself and what you need, exploring, is that really what I need? Are there other ways I could get to what I'm trying to do? Being curious about your counterpart and being curious about the situation you're in. That's part of what makes it so amazing.
So when you say curious, it brings up for me kind of like a receptive condition. And I feel like for a lot of people, negotiation brings up this kind of oh my gosh, I have to be on guard, right? And can I be curious and on guard at the same time? So if I'm curious, will I just get taken to the cleaners? Will they just totally take advantage of me like a babe in the woods? How can I be curious and also have good boundaries about my own interests?
So my philosophy is that transparency is one of the greatest things that you can show when you're in a negotiation. And so I often say that the two things that I've negotiated all over the world, and there are a lot of things that I've seen about people and how they feel about negotiation. And one is that they're afraid of it. A lot of people we're all afraid of it at different points in time. I mean, I've been a professional negotiator for 30 years, and there are certain negotiations that I don't like doing, the IRS. Right. So that's just a reality of being human, and we're afraid in those situations because we're afraid we're going to get judged. But the other problem that I've seen over and over and over again is that we go into negotiations feeling like we can't trust our counterparts. And when we feel like we can't trust our counterparts, we are guarded, we get protective. And in that protection mode, we don't make effective decisions for ourselves or for the negotiation or for the relationship as a whole. And so certainly you have to pay attention to when you're going to be transparent and when you're not going to be transparent. But my experience would suggest that being transparent has far greater rewards from a negotiation perspective than actually thinking about negotiation as a game and playing, holding your cards close to your vest or having to be 8 moves ahead. Why can't you just be in the moment and thinking about focusing on how do I make this relationship better? How do we both get more out of this relationship, which is really what business is all about in the first place.
Right. Relationships. And, one of the things that we had talked about before when we first spoke was the idea of kind of like a win-win in negotiation. And it really aligns with the idea that I've talked about in the sales process. Like, I don't want consultants to sell everyone. I don't want them to force that on anyone. And I also don't want them to constantly be being rejected. So the thing that I would say that we're looking for is the thing that's in the highest good of all concerned. So it has to be in their highest good, my highest good, me or the consultant who's selling them, and then the highest good of like their customers or whoever they serve, and my team, like everybody involved. And I heard you say something similar about negotiations.
Yes. So my philosophy on negotiation is that it is a conversation about a relationship, and you cannot win a relationship, but you can get more value out of it. And it's really, negotiation for me is all about that focus of how do we get more? There is so much to be had in the world, and there's plenty for all of us to have. So how do we get more together? Because negotiation is a hopeful act. We negotiate in the moment with information from the past that we use to predict the future, which never plays out the way we expect it to anyway. So if you don't have that relationship in the moment, and you're either stuck in the past or stuck in the future that doesn't exist yet, then you lose, you are no longer curious about how to make things better for either yourself or your counterpart, because you have this kind of view of this is how it's supposed to be. And that isn't necessarily how it's going to be in a way that's most effective for both of you.
Right. Can you talk us through a negotiation that you've done and like illustrate, like, what are the steps in negotiating? Maybe like with a story of somebody that you've worked with.
Sure. I mean, so one example is I was negotiating for a retail client. They were a small retailer. They have about, let's just call it $1.5 million in annual revenue. And their landlord was a $12 billion market cap company. And this was last year during the pandemic, and retail stores were getting slammed. And so, the first step is understanding and getting clarity on what it is that you actually want. What are the possibilities? What are the different things that could happen, could exist? In a real estate situation, it's like, it's not just about what you're paying in rent, it's about what you're paying in your operating expenses, your CAM. What are you doing? What kind of security is there? What kind of, how is the building being taken care of? Are there tenant improvements to be had? I mean, there's a long list of different things that you can consider, even when you're trying to deal with in the pandemic situation. So one is getting super clear on what it is that you want. And that's something that we work with our clients to understand, and setting the prioritization of those things. What of the things that are possible, what's the most important to you? But then the second part of it is really getting clear on what's doable for your counterpart, what you think is doable for your counterpart. And this is something that a lot of people don't spend any time doing at all. They get so myopically focused on what they want, and they pay no consideration whatsoever to what their counterpart needs and wants in order to be successful. And so it's really researching your counterpart, both the person and the company. What motivates this person? How do they think? Do they have articles that they've written? Have they ever done speeches? Looking at their Facebook, their all their social media, what kind of things do they talk about? How do they elevate themselves, right? So you get an understanding of who that person is. And then when it comes to the company, how does the company make money? From a dollar coming in to a dollar being kept as profit, what's everything in the middle? What does that look like? Because when you can then look and say, how can I create a deal that is in line with how my counterpart sees profitability, and I respect their need to make margins and all that, what does that look like, right? And so in this particular case, that's what we did. We figured out what we were able to do. And then I researched the landlord, and that turned out to be a hugely important element, because the landlord started to kind of play a game because, they're big guy, they're gorillas, they're going to just kind of pound the small people into the ground. And what I did is I did some research, and they were in Florida, and I said, okay, where are all the properties this company manages? What's their occupancy rate? What types of tenants are in those buildings? What's happening with those tenant categories? Are they nail salons and hairdressers? Are they doctors? Are they big box retailers? What does that mix look like for them, to estimate what I thought was going to happen to their business? And so then when I get on the phone with the landlord at one point, and I said, look, I've looked at your vacancy rates across the whole region, right? And this is what I'm seeing. And in this particular building, in this particular location, you have the highest vacancy rate of all. And your mix of tenant is this and this, and this is what's happening in those industries, and da 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 da. And he just sat on the phone, and he was just like, I could hear his jaw hit the floor, because nobody has ever done that with him. And he's been doing this for decades. And he's like, I can't believe you did that level of homework. And I said, of course I would do that. I mean, that's what I do, right? And so understanding what you want, what's important to you, and then understanding what's important to the counterpart. But then it's also about, before you engage, well, right when you engage, get clear on what the process is for negotiating. Negotiate what the process looks like. How long is it going to take? Who's involved? Who has to sign off? What happens if that person's on vacation? All of those things, nail those things down, because it's an innocuous thing. The process for getting to an agreement is pretty innocuous. But if you can get agreement on what that process looks like, and you can contribute to it, that actually adds to your credibility. It shows that you're serious about getting to a workable deal for both sides, and it puts you on more of a level footing, especially if you're smaller compared to your counterpart.
I mean, that's amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So just kind of, and then there's a bunch of stuff at the back end once you kind of get to the negotiation too, and you're in the negotiation. But that front end part, on my podcast, I just interviewed a professor from the Harvard program on negotiation, and I agree with him 100%. His name is Joshua Weiss. And he says that 70% of effective negotiation happens in the preparation phase. 70%, but very, very, very few people spend time in that 70%.
And is that in the preparation that you were talking about, the homework piece, or is that in kind of like establishing the ground rules of the negotiation, like with the timelines you're talking about?
So it's really in the research stage, the researching what you need and you want. And it sounds simple to say, know what you want. Yeah. But very few people do. And very few people, a lot of people don't even understand their numbers enough to be able to articulate what's going on. And, oh, wait, if I do this thing here, what does that do to profit down here? Or what does that do to my gross margin or my cash flow? And you really have to understand how to kind of move things around in a way, not to play a game with it, but it's really about how do you optimize the value that's being created for you in the deal. And, your counterpart has to be concerned about doing the same for him or her, but how do you make sure that you're not destroying value for them too?
Yeah. Right. So I think it's super fascinating, the kind of the human piece that you're doing here, where you're researching like their Facebook and things. What's an example of something that you've discovered in that kind of research that you were able to leverage in a negotiation?
So one of the most important parts is when I'm first engaging with somebody. So negotiation is an accumulation of yeses. So now there's some people in the market who say, no, you want to get them to no, because that gives them, that makes them feel like they're in power. I don't buy that. And in all my 30 years, almost 30 years of business negotiation, that's not an effective strategy. I have not seen that work. So when I'm first engaging with somebody, I have this little quiz that I created that helps people kind of understand what their negotiation style is. And the first part of each style is whether somebody is modern or traditional as a communicator. And it's a very down and dirty way to go, how does this person like to talk to me? So I was just on the phone with somebody who had her name, comma, MBA.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I know that person is more traditional. I know that, and then when I look at her LinkedIn, she's got long paragraphs written, to describe what she's done. She has every job she's ever done. She's just super descriptive, super detailed. That person tends to schedule hour-long meetings at the first get-go. They tend to like emails that are well thought out, well written in paragraph form. They love having meetings where everybody gets, on the phone or in the room and everyone's on the same page. And that's a traditional communicator.
Mm-hmm.
The modern hates all of that.
That's me.
They want
Paragraphs.
they want a 15-minute meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll make a decision. And if you make it 5 or 10, that's even better, right? But they want a short meeting to suss it out, to say, okay, is this worth more of my time, right?
Yeah.
And they like bullet points. They do not read long emails. They do not accept hour-long meetings out of the starting gate. And they tend to make decisions much more quickly. And they feel that it's everybody else's responsibility to get themselves on board. They don't have to need to be part of that process,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when I look at somebody's LinkedIn profile and I see somebody have MBA, CPA, CFA, MOUSE after their name, and long paragraphs and all that, I know that they're probably a traditional communicator. I am a modern communicator. I like bullets. I like things short. My initial intro meetings are 15 minutes. When I do a networking meeting, it's 15 minutes. I don't do anything longer than that. When this person set up a meeting with me, it was an hour-long meeting. So if I had set up a meeting with her first, right, I would have scheduled it for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have started there, because even though that's not my way of working, it's hers. And because I'm trying to accumulate yeses,
Mm-hmm.
how I reach out to her is the easiest way to create a yes.
Right.
It's the easiest way. And so that's one of the ways that kind of plays out and becomes important. And then you adjust it as you get to know somebody, but it's really useful. I find it really useful when I'm first introducing myself to somebody, or vice versa.
I love how I love the idea of yeses. It feels, I think negotiation is necessarily kind of like a masculine thing. Although collaborative, coming to agreements are more of a feminine thing. And so I think negotiation is this wonderful blend, because what you're talking about is like, how do we find something that makes both sides happy? But it kind of conflicts with a lot of the way negotiation tends to be regarded, which is like, go crush your opponent, and this scorched earth policy. There's no good negotiation unless everybody leaves unhappy. It's kind of the opposite. So I feel like you're, speaking of modern, you're kind of redefining what negotiation is and what it should be. Is it the case that in reality, negotiation is and has always been that way, and the PR is all scorched earth and everybody must lose? Or is it the case that it's kind of evolving?
So in my experience, it's more collaborative. Effective negotiators are very collaborative. They're very problem solving, or oriented towards solving problems together. And they tend to be very creative about how to get to a solution that works. And yet, the PR, to your point, the PR, how you see negotiation playing out in the movies is not how negotiation works. It's just not, whether it's, Up in the Air or Pirates of the Caribbean or whatever. It's just, but there are different negotiation styles that you do see play out. And what happens is that we all learned how to be effective negotiators when we were about 4. and then as we got older, we started hearing this word no more. And so what we realized was there was a style that worked better for us, that got us more yeses than nos. And so we kind of had defaulted to that style. So if you were a child who threw temper tantrums and threw your toys and screamed and yelled, you're probably still doing that today.
Crazy.
You are probably still doing that. Maybe not exactly in that same way, but I've had people throw dishes at me. I've had people call me names. I mean, I've seen it all.
Yeah.
And so you're probably still doing that in business, and you're losing business as a result of it. You just don't know it because you just are not paying attention to it. On the flip side of that, if you were somebody who ran between your mom's legs or ran into your bedroom and shoved your head under the blankets or the pillow, you're probably still doing that too. And that's also costing you business and costing you your relationships. And so, this winner take all, and I have a name for that style. We call it a champion. And that champion style is somebody who they see negotiation as a battle, and they go into it fully armed, fully armored, and intent on annihilating their opponent. And you know them because they brag about all their negotiations. I met somebody not long ago he's like, oh, I love to negotiate. As soon as somebody says that to me, I'm like, this person is probably a champion.
Yeah.
So, I love to negotiate. Otherwise I wouldn't have made it a career, but not in the way that these guys do. So he's like all excited because he went into a pizza shop and negotiated a 20% and got a 20% discount. That's not a negotiation. What men are really effective at is haggling. Women are not so effective at haggling. And the challenge is that so many people, the movies have done it, the press has done it. It's just politicians have done. They've turned negotiation, which is this incredibly unique skill set that only human beings possess. They've turned it into this haggling, this win-lose kind of thing. But real negotiation is about creating a bigger pie. And I use an example of an egg, which I often have sitting on my desk, but I don't right now. But an egg, I go and I grab an egg out of a refrigerator. 3 people want that egg. How do you get 3 people that egg? And people will say, usually they'll say they'll boil it and cut it up. They'll scramble it and cut it up. Every once in a blue moon, somebody will say, well, you crack it and then you have the yolk and the white. You have right. But why'd you have to break the shell? You can take a small pin and poke a hole in the top and the bottom and blow gently, and the yolk and the white will come out of the shell. So you have a fully intact shell. You can still separate the yolk from the white, and you can use the shell to create a piece of art. You can use the yolk to make mayonnaise, and you can use the white to make an omelet still. So there are 3 specific parts of that egg that have specific value, right? But it's this common thing that we all look at, and we just think about it as it's just this egg, and we always boil it, scramble it, or fry it. That's what you do with an egg, and you throw the shell away, right? So even if somebody said that they were going to crack it and then separate the yolk from the white, I'd want them to tell me that they were going to compost it. What are you going to do with the shell? Because there's value in the shell. So effective negotiation is about figuring out how to turn a negotiation, how to take and make an egg out of every negotiation. And research shows that there's 42% more value in most of our negotiations than we realize.
Really? So it's, I like that it's creating more value than there was originally, is what you're describing. And to me, first of all, I love creating value. And I think most people get excited by that idea. I love the idea of negotiation as a creative process and a collaborative one. Like, let's come together, and instead of like fighting, to me, the classic examples are divorce and things like that, where everybody's mad and now we have to divide things up. But like, what if we could come up with like, well, everybody is mad, but we want what's best for everyone, and can we create something that's valuable, and what ideas can we have? And that makes it, to me, a much more exciting prospect. For most of my clients, they're going to be in situations where we've been told never negotiate, or you're always going to have to negotiate, or whatever. And I feel like, here's the truth, is that I've been doing this 25 years, and I feel like I've been in plenty of situations where I've had to negotiate something. And when I felt that fear of like having something taken away from me, what I very often thought about, I have had big backers behind me. So I've negotiated on behalf of my corporate client in deals with our clients and in deals with current clients. So I feel like I have seen it where I was like in a no, I'm not budging. I just don't feel like I'm going to want to do this. I've been in situations where the client is like, well, we can't afford that, so what can we do? And then we get creative. What's your kind of rule of thumb for someone who isn't put in a position where they're going to have to negotiate for, let's say the client wants to either reduce the price or, do something different?
So I always say price is an output of a negotiation, not an input. So we come to a price because we have all sorts of assumptions that go into developing the price. So I don't want to negotiate the math. I don't want to negotiate the answer to the math problem. I want to negotiate what goes into the math problem, right? Because if I can get agreement on the assumptions that go into developing the answer, then I have more flexibility. I have more opportunities to be creative. But if all I'm going to do is sit and argue about a number, and I don't understand all the elements that go into the number, what's driving that number? Is it a function of resources? Is it a function of people, human resources? Is it a function of availability? Is it a function of time? I mean, what there are usually a number of variables that go into evaluating that price. So which ones drive value more? And there's one or two of them that drive. Usually there's no more than, my experience is that no matter how big the contract is, there's usually 6 and no more than 10 major variables that drive value the most. Mm-hmm. Figuring out what those 6 to 10 variables are, those are the ones you want to really have a super solid position on. And the rest of them, you can those can become the things that you play around with more to figure out how to create more value on the 6 to 10. Mm-hmm. But it's really kind of figuring out what are all those variables and how do I negotiate those things? Because that's like I said, that's where you get creative. That's where the value sits.
I mean, that's really smart. For most consultants, I think we would think that there was like scope and time. And I feel like there's also like the value to the client. And I think we could really get nuanced on scope and time and value to the client and kind of find those other variables you're talking about. That's just super helpful. So I understand that you negotiate on behalf of clients, which I think is amazing. If someone has a very scary negotiation, they just bring you in and you just do it for them. I didn't even know that was a thing. So I love that, outside of lawyers or mediators. So I love that part. And then do you also teach people like consultants and business coaches how to do negotiations so they are better equipped to do them?
Yes, actually, we just launched our new Venn Masters program, which is essentially Toastmasters for negotiation. So it's a very different way of learning about negotiation and very experience-based. So it's lots of practice, and it's something I'm super excited about bringing to the world, because nobody teaches us how to be effective negotiators. I mean, we keep doing that thing we did when we were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and nobody has helped us figure out how to do it any differently. And we think that just because we got a deal that it was a good deal, and that's not the case. And so I'm super excited about our Venn Masters program, and we just opened registration for it and are launching it this summer.
Awesome. So I'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes. That is a fit for who?
It's a fit for anybody who has really any type of relationship that they want to get more value out of. Even if you're going through a divorce, I just did a divorce, helped one of my friends through her divorce. And, it started out with that angry thing that you were talking about, and him having, he was the math person and the spreadsheet person, and that all intimidated her. And he's like, I'm keeping 70%, she gets 30. And if she doesn't like it, she can sue me. And it was like, she was like losing her mind. And oh my God, it was a thing. And so she's like, Christine, I can't talk to him. Would you just talk to him? And 3 days later, he's on the phone with me. He said, I'm going to give her all of it.
Yep.
And then 2 days after, then she gets on the phone with me and she's like, oh my God, I can't believe that you got me all of it. And I'm like, so now what are you going to do? Right. And she's like, well, I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this. And I was like, well, so we worked through it, and she ended up giving him 50% of it back, plus $50,000 that she had borrowed from him for a business loan.
Wow.
And so she called it a good karma divorce. And, so it could be that you're wanting to figure out a different way of negotiating in that situation. It could be that you are a business owner and you are trying to figure out, how do I negotiate with my employees in a different way, or my clients in a different way, or a supplier in a different way. And so it's really anybody who wants to figure out how to bring collaboration to a different level and get more out of their relationships.
Oh, it sounds amazing. And I really love the idea of really strengthening that aspect, because it is relevant to so many areas of life. And I think it's just the kind of thing that I think mostly women, but definitely people in general feel this kind of deficit and this kind of lack. And boy, I hope this kind of thing never comes up in my life, because I'm positive I'm not very good at it, except for the people, as you said, the kind of like the more warlike people who are like, bring it on. And they're not going to do a very good job with it either. So I love that you're offering that. Where's a good place for people to find out more about you?
So the best place to go is to our website at Venn Negotiation, and it's 3 N's in a row. So because it's a Venn diagram, so VennNegotiation.com. They can also check out our podcast in the Venn Zone and go to venn.zone and connect up on the website. And if they go there, we got a free gift waiting for them if they go there too. So.
Terrific. Well, it has been super exciting to talk to you. And I love this topic. I think it's, as I said, it's like very charged, and the more we know about it, the safer it feels. And so I love that you brought that to us in a really enlightening way. So thank you, Christine. I'm sure everybody will be tracking you down. And on behalf of Christine and me, I want to wish everyone listening a profitable and joyful consulting business. Thanks for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to get video updates. Thanks.